To achieve the potentiality of life, we have to be willing to step out of what we know and go into the unknown. Because the unknown is where 99.9% of human potential resides. But most people never get there, because what happens in the hero's journey is that the first thing is there is a call to adventure. Every single person in their life, there could be an event, an experience, a person, an opportunity, something will arise in your life which is a call to adventure, which is an opportunity for you to now step beyond what you know into the unknown. And that call to adventure is the beginning of the hero's journey. Now, if you reflect on your own life, this might have already happened. This may be happening right now. And if it hasn't, rest assured it will happen. Something will happen in your life which gives you the opportunity to go on an adventure, to explore beyond what you know. Now, what do you think happens to 99% of people who get the call to adventure? Thank you, Ron, for your kind introduction, and thank you to Mazars for inviting us here. Really happy to be with you, and I hope this afternoon, evening, I should say, will be a kind of journey of thinking, a journey of introspection, reflection. We're quite an intimate group today, so I'll keep it quite interactive and informal. And I hope that some of the points which we share and talk about will resonate with you and may ignite something within you. It's a tradition in spiritual circles that before we begin any kind of discussion on deeper subject matter, that we just take a few moments to pause and just remember our teachers. So with your permission, I'll do that. And I'll just say a short Sanskrit prayer, which just helps us to kind of tune in. And for yourselves, you can just close your eyes and for these moments, try to disconnect a little bit from the concerns of the world and try to bring your heart and mind into a space which is fertile for learning. Om Ajnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukham karoti vachalam pangam langhayate girim yat kripa tamaham vande Shri Gurum dinatarinam paramananda madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Just good to actually get to know each other a little better, and just for me to understand a bit about you. And I'm going to actually just ask you actually a few questions before we kind of lean into today's topic, which is very, very pertinent. Of course, it's something that's on all of our minds. But I'm just going to ask you a few questions and just ask you to share with either the person next to you or in threes or whatever it works. And the first question, I'll just give you a few moments to discuss with those next to you. What is the one thing that you think life is teaching you right now? It could be a situation you're going through, it could be a relationship, it could be something you're endeavoring for, that you're succeeding or striving for, and maybe it's working, maybe it's not. What do you think, according to your situation in life at the moment, you're being taught? Anything you can share with each other? Would anyone like to share something life is teaching them at the moment? Yes?
That I'm not great with technology.
That you're not great with technology. We forgive you, that's okay. Yeah, it's amazing. But it's like that sometimes. It's life can be humbling at times. And it's said actually being humbled is actually a very beautiful thing. They say as monks we were taught, one of the first things we were taught in the monastery is that when you wake up, the first thing you do in the morning is you bow down. And because it said that humility is an interesting word. It comes from the etymology humus, which means soil. And it said that within a humble heart or within a humble consciousness, there's always room to improve, and there's always room to grow, and there's always room to evolve and elevate yourself. And so sometimes life humbles us, and sometimes life brings us down to the ground a little bit. But even that's a good thing sometimes, yeah. Anything else life is teaching you at the moment? Anyone? Don't be shy. From the group here at the front, anything came out?
I think life is
Patience.
Patience. Teaching me, reminding me again and again to be patient. Things will take time.
Yeah, everything has its timeline in life, and we have to be able to recognize that being patient is the key to actually allowing a higher plan to evolve in our life. And when we try to control or force things, then we may go against the natural course of activities. Yeah, thank you so much. Anything else you're learning? Just interested to know where you guys are at in life.
To be more independent?
To be more independent and self-sufficient. And does that mean not to rely on others as much and to kind of fly your own plane? Yeah. There at the back, was it something?
I think my life is teaching me to take risks. And,
Okay.
not to be scared to take the risk. And
Okay, wow.
yeah, because in the long term, you will regret it. Like regret not trying.
Okay. Yes. And we're going to talk exactly about that today. Yeah, one more here. Someone wanted to share something.
I think we were sharing with each other that life is teaching us how to make decisions in terms of how to decide between different priorities that you may have in life. And where to focus your energy.
Yeah, every decision creates our destiny, and sometimes we're making decisions and we're not always so aware and so conscious of what impact it's creating for our future situation. So yeah, very good. And the second question, I think I'll let you off. I won't ask you the answers to that question, but something to think about. Again, another thing we learned when we joined the monastery is we often were taught to try to look at ourselves through the lens of others, because we tend to do a lot of projection in our life, and we project our opinions, our thoughts, our vision on other people. And what they would teach us is to do the exact opposite, and then we would actually gain another dimension of understanding about ourselves that could be the key to becoming the best version of ourselves. So yeah, these are some questions you can take them away and think about from time to time. And the final question I want to ask you is, when you hear the cost of living or the cost of living crisis, what's the kind of first word or the kind of first feeling or the first thought that comes to your mind? Is there anything in your mind that kind of, does it affect you? Is it something that's not so relevant to you? Is it something you're fearful about? Is there anything, just to get some ideas from you of how you're responding to the cost of living crisis in the world at the moment? Anything you'd like to share? Stress, yeah? Yeah, you guys are all, it's not that you're in the millionaire brackets and beyond the cost of living crisis at Mazars. It's stressful. Anything else? Overwhelming, yeah.
Scary.
Yeah, a sense of not being in control, a sense that there are factors outside of your life that are determining your own journey that you can't always influence, yeah. Anything else? Inequality, yeah. And how there's so much of a divide, and how there's the haves and the have-nots, and that creates sometimes a little bit of a uncomfortable feeling within us. Today we're going to kind of reflect on the cost of living crisis, but we're going to kind of look at it from a different perspective, and I'm going to share that with you. But I think what we're trying to do in these events is something which will be my first learning that I want to share with you today. Social scientists, what they say is between the age of 0 and 25, wisdom and age is actually proportionate. So that kind of makes sense that a 16-year-old generally has more wisdom than a 10-year-old. And in that way, as we're growing older, we're kind of naturally, in most cases, becoming wiser. But the interesting thing is between the ages of 25 and 75, it's actually said that wisdom and age actually have no correlation. I don't know if that's shocking to you or that's something you've thought about. But this is actually something that's been proven, that it's not that a 65-year-old is necessarily wiser than a 35-year-old. And it's not necessarily that someone who's seen more years in the world knows more about life. And the reason given is this: between the ages of 0 and 25, generally we're in an educational system. And so what's happening is that naturally our wisdom is growing because we're going through a structured way of learning. However, between the age of 25 and 75, generally we're not in the educational system unless you're doing like 5 PhDs or something for the rest of your life. How do you think we learn generally between 25 and 75? Experience, exactly. We are learning through experience. But my next question to you is, do we always learn from experience? So that means everyone between 25 and 75 is going through experiences. But some are learning and some are not learning. So how do you learn from experience?
Reflect.
You think about it.
Exactly. You reflect. Between the ages of 25 and 75, we learn, but we only learn from our experiences provided we're reflecting on them, provided we're introspecting about them, provided we're going away in a quiet space and deeply trying to understand what lessons I'm meant to draw from these things that are happening to me. And that reflection is incredibly powerful. And when I say reflection, I don't mean sitting at the end of the day at a Costa Coffee around a table and just talking with your friends for 5 hours. That could be reflection, but not necessarily. Because reflection, for something to truly be reflection, it means to see our current world through a microscope or a lens or a wisdom which helps us to penetrate deeper than just the immediate things that have happened. Generally, when we're talking with friends, we're talking about the immediate things that happened, but how much are we really digging behind what those things happened and trying to derive deeper lessons? And therefore they say, small minds discuss people. Average minds discuss events, but great minds discuss wisdom. And through the lens of wisdom and wisdom traditions, we can actually draw a greater benefit from all the experiences that we're going through. And so these events are an opportunity to do that. And specifically today, we're talking about the cost of living crisis. And yes, we're living in a world which is changing. Would you agree? Most of you, I'm guessing, I'm looking around at the room, and most of you are definitely above 30. I don't think there's anyone in the room under 30, right? Is there? Oh, you're under, okay. Oh, wow. That's what working at Mazars does to you. Okay. Okay, well, okay, throw that one out the window then. But yeah, most of us have been in the world for some time, and we've seen how the world has changed. And yeah, the world has changed. They say in 1960, this was the reaction. I don't know if anyone got this from their parents, or you were all good students. Well, many of you went here in 1960. But they say from 1960, 50 years later to 2010, this is what happens nowadays. The blame is placed in a different place. And it's quite interesting. This is actually this is deeper than it looks, I think, because as time has gone by, where we place blame, where we place responsibility, where we place liability has changed dramatically. The educational system has changed a lot as well. So times are changing. How we waste time changes as well. In the 60s, there were the yo-yos. In the 1970s, there were the most elementary of computer games. And then there was Pac-Man. This is Pac-Man, right? Yeah. See if you remember this one, the 90s. This is how we used to waste time in the 90s. Anyone know what this is? Tamagotchi. Did anyone have one? When I saw this, like, oh my God, that's like a flashback. In 2000s, Facebook and the social media was launched, and how are we wasting time now? Looking at memes like this. So it's interesting how times change. We used to celebrate our birthdays with lots of presents, and now we celebrate our birthdays with lots of notifications through the technology. Times are changing. Why would you send a text when you can call people? And now it's, why would you call people when you can send them a text? Even the way we use technology changes. So we're living in a world of constant change. And it's said that change is unstoppable. No one can stop change from happening. No matter how much we try to control the situation around us, change has to happen. That's the nature of the world. It's constantly mutating, constantly evolving. Change is also unpredictable. How it will happen and when it will happen, we don't know. Relationships change, health changes, the world around us changes. And change is also uncontrollable. The scale and the magnitude of that change, we just don't know what will occur in our lives. And therefore, the ability to adapt to a changing world is absolutely key to living a progressive life. And today we're specifically talking about a huge change in the world, which is the cost of living crisis. All of you have mentioned some of your feelings about it. And here we see just in raw numbers what the cost of living crisis is, and how, the basic necessities of life, the basic things which we need to invest in on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis, are becoming more and more expensive. And therefore there's more and more of a pressure on just attaining the necessities of life. And therefore people's habits are also changing, and people are by force having to cut back on different things. And I'm sure when you see some of this, you may be able to relate to it, or you may be able to see others who have been going through this. The cost of living crisis raises many, many questions on many, many levels. You can say on a political level, the cost of living crisis raises the question about the government's responsibility to people, government policies, and how they affect the people in the world today. So we could see the cost of living crisis through a political lens and see, what discussions we could have on that. The cost of living crisis raises economic questions about the way the economy is structured, the stability of it, the gap between rich and poor, and the haves and the have-nots. We can also see the cost of living crisis through a mental health lens, and not just the physical effect of the cost of living crisis on physical survival in this world, but what it does to people on a mental and emotional and relationship level to their health. And we could also see it on a social level. What does the cost of living crisis tell us in terms of our lifestyle, in terms of our communities, in terms of how we relate to each other? But today, what we're going to do is look at the cost of living crisis through a different lens, and that's a spiritual lens. And the cost of living crisis through a spiritual lens raises the question, what does it actually mean to live? Because this is the first question a spiritualist would ask when talking about such an issue. And therefore, I'm just going to give you again a couple of minutes, and I just want you amongst yourselves to just share your ideas with each other. What do you think is the difference between existing and living? Is there a difference? Are they the same thing? Is there an overlap? Just give you a couple of minutes to share your thoughts with each other on that, and then we'll come back. Okay, I'll just ask you to come back. And maybe some of you can share your thoughts. What do you think is the difference between existing and living? And remember, this is our chance to reflect on our own life and question our own journey and dig a little deeper. Anyone like to share anything? What do you, yeah.
I think existing is you just living your life, doing your chores, be it office, being at home. Living is doing the same things, but if you're happy about what you're doing, then you're living life.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, yeah. That kind of relates actually to the very first one I had, yeah. It almost, mind reader, it almost feels as though existing is going with the flow of life, meeting up to the responsibilities, doing the things that are demanded of you, the things that are expected, that society ordains as your duty. Whereas living has a sense of not just going with the flow, but finding your flow, finding where your ability can be harnessed, your potential, unlocking, untapping what may be there that society doesn't necessarily encourage you to explore. And in that way, many self-development people talking about living in the flow state. And so when you're really living, you're living to your a fuller potential. Yeah, thank you so much. Anything else? What do you think is the difference between existing and living?
I think another one would be where you're living would be you're doing things to enrich your own life and those of others around you. And with existing is potentially just being, not bothered about yourself or those around you, just sort of being.
Yeah. Well, that kind of also similarly relates to the second one as well. I'm just getting quite creepy now. Yeah, existing is almost just like surviving, just doing the things that, allow us to kind of just meet the demands of day-to-day life and pay the bills and, keep immediate people around us happy. Whereas living is almost a bit more, creative and going beyond what we've created and seeing whether there's more that we can achieve. Yeah. Anything else? What else? Dig a little deeper. What do you think is the difference between existing and living? Is there a difference?
It's all about choice.
Choice?
So maybe you're already in your categories. And I'm going to let down the third line.
Yeah.
But in existing, you have no choice. You don't have choices. But in living, you're making choices.
Okay. Oh my God. This is super creepy. Because existing means
Who's next?
no pressure. Yeah, existing is almost like it's activities that you're doing that you don't have a choice over. If you look at your life and you ask yourselves, how many things am I doing that I have consciously chosen to do? And how much of my life is just activities that I'm, compelled to do or forced to do to some extent? Yeah, that definitely reveals something about our life, yeah. Something else. Don't worry if you don't get the next slide. Anyone else? Any other ideas or thoughts? Okay, let me just share with you a few of the other things that when we're existing, we're mainly seeking, and you can see a lot of these are interrelated and they're quite similar. But when we're existing, our focus is on security, comfort, finding stability in our life. Whereas when we're living, we're seeking discovery, we're ready to take risks, we're going beyond the comfort zone into a different stretch zone. Existing tends to be mechanical and routine, whereas living tends to be, again, creative and flexible. Do we wake up in the morning and just think, how am I going to get through the day? Or do we wake up in the morning with a hunger, with an enthusiasm, looking forward to the day, seeing life as an adventure and having that hunger for everything we're going to be doing in that day? When we're existing, we're generally always looking for an escape because life becomes quite monotonous, life becomes quite unstimulating. And therefore, we're always looking for something separate from our normal life to escape to. Whereas when we're living, there's not a sense that we need to escape. Our life is interesting as it is. And when we're existing, life is generally tiring. If we find life tiring, if we feel like it's just grinding us down and we're losing energy as the days go by, or are we finding it energizing, inspiring, something that we are growing in years, but we almost feel like we're getting younger and younger? Someone once said that to me. They said the sign that your life is going in the right direction is as you grow in your years, you become like a child again. And you get that hunger is growing, and that curiosity is still there. So this is really, really important for us to consider. And like you can keep a list like this close to you often, and regularly ask the question, am I existing or am I living? And it's not, this is dynamic. We could be moving from one column to the other, and it's always changing. And of course, there are times in our life when we may have to focus on some things more than others. But generally, if our life is tending towards the living, moving towards that left-hand column, then we can actually understand that we're fulfilling the potentiality of our time here. Now, one thing with this table that's really important to understand is that it's not that existing is unimportant, because unless we're surviving, there's no question of thriving. So we're not saying the things in the existing column are bad or are negative or are things we shouldn't put energy into. But what we are saying, or what spiritual teachers tell us, is that this in and of itself is not the goal. To be secure in your life in and of itself is not the goal, but it's useful if from that platform you can then discover what you're really looking for. It's not that what you have to do is unimportant. Yes, we have responsibilities. Yes, we have duties. We can't be irresponsible. And if we do that, our life will move in a different direction. However, there should be also some sense of, along with that responsibility, we have space to pursue what really moves and touches our hearts. And so the reason I'm sharing this with you is because the terminology, the cost of living crisis, according to spiritual teachers, may not actually be accurate. Because what we're probably dealing with the world or the immediate economic crisis that we're dealing with in the world today is not really a cost of living crisis. It's a cost of existing crisis. The cost of existing has gone up. The cost of existing is creating, a wave in the world that's causing stress and so on and so forth. But according to spiritual teachers, the cost of existing is increasing for sure. But the cost of living is something which is much higher than that. So if you think the cost of living is going high, the cost of living is actually much higher than a number. And therefore, my next question would be to you, what is the cost of living? If the cost of existing is a number, then what's the cost of living? Any ideas?
Your actual life.
Your life? Okay. What do you mean by that?
If you're wasting your life, the cost of living could be equal to wasting your life.
So my question, let me rephrase my question, and I think you're along the right lines. If the cost of existing is I need to earn a certain amount of salary so that I can do all of these things on the left-hand side, then what would be the price that I have to pay to do all of those things on the right? What's the cost of living? What price do you have to pay in your life to live?
Is it free?
It's free, okay. Is it free? I'm asking you.
Is it just a choice? It's a mindset.
It's a choice, it's a mindset. What kind of choice? What kind of mindset? What's the price you have to pay to live?
Free from worries.
You have to think.
You have to think, okay? to be thinking, to be challenging, constantly challenging yourself, trying to discover. I once went on the London Underground and it was a great quote. It said, "The most dangerous phrase in the English language is, 'We've always done it this way.'" So there's a sense in which unless we're thinking and challenging, we can't actually live. What else? What else do you think? What will bring you to this left-hand column? What price do you have to pay? Because okay, how many of the world's population do you think are existing as opposed to living?
Most.
Okay, so that clearly that 99% or whatever it is are not paying the price. So what's the price?
Your dreams,
Your dreams. Yeah, but everyone's got dreams.
experiences, opportunities, everything you forego and don't do because
Okay, so you're saying sacrifice. Is that what you're saying? Okay, so sacrifice could be another element or ingredient to actually live in this world. Great. What else?
I think also positivity, looking forward to what your life could be,
Okay.
sort of imagining what it could be and working towards
Optimism, hope.
optimism, hope, yeah.
Yeah, optimism, hope, the idea of a brighter future. Yes.
Asking
No.
the right questions.
Asking the right questions. Yeah.
Responsibilities.
No responsibilities. What do you mean by that?
If we don't have any responsibilities, so we don't have any worries to think about.
Okay, let me rephrase that if you'll allow me, and then you can see whether you agree with me. Making space in your life. Head space, time space, and creative space in your life to actually explore. Because when you're just bombarded by so many demands, then you have no space to actually think. So if you want to live, you've got to create space. Brilliant. What else?
Is it appreciating in everything when you're existing? You probably there are things where you're living, you just don't appreciate them.
When you're existing, there are things.
I'm living in
Yeah.
the left column,
Mhm.
but I'm just stuck. I'm just doing the same things, but I'm so stuck that I can't see that there are really good things in my existing column.
Okay. So you're saying it's gratitude and recognizing what you have?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so those who are existing, they may actually be experiencing more, but they haven't developed the gratitude. I liken gratitude to digestion, because it's almost like you can put so much food in your mouth, but unless you chew it and digest it, you can't actually get the benefit of that food. So in the same way, every single day, so many amazing things are happening to us, but unless we have the... Yeah.
If you come here every day, you cannot see that.
Yeah.
And you have to remember every day that this is an amazing place to work because you have that amazing view. But I come here a lot. And sometimes I get here early in the morning and the sun's coming up. And I'm like, wow, this is a really amazing place to work. When something doesn't work and I'm frustrated, but I need to remember that not many people get to come and walk along there, which is amazing.
Yeah, so that gratitude, thank you. They say actually gratitude is the mother of all qualities, so that when gratitude is present, all other good qualities come in one's character. Thank you. Anything else? What else could be the price of living? Freedom. Freedom from, or?
Freedom from making choices that you want to make for yourself.
Okay, yeah. And you raise a really important question, because what happens in the world today is that there's so much noise around us, the noise of expectation, the noise of opinions, the noise of other people's vision for your life, that in the midst of all of that noise, you feel like you don't have the freedom to hear your own heart. And so that's also another, we need to have that freedom, that time to disconnect from the noise of the world. Yeah, these are all really, really great points. And I mean, I could share a lot more with you, and I'm going to end actually in the next 10-15 minutes, but I just want to share one final thing with you, which I think could help you to see how it is in your life that you could go on this journey and make this shift to living more than just existing. And what I want to share with you is something called the hero's journey. If I was to ask you of a political and economic, a philanthropic hero or heroine, could you name some names for me? People who you consider to be heroic in this world. Anyone comes to your mind? You can shout out some names. It can be in any sphere of life. Who do you hold as heroic, as someone who's achieved something amazing, someone who's really lived? Come on, I'm sure you have some role models or some inspirational people in your
Does it have to be
life.
someone famous?
No, no, not necessarily.
But my dad for me.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to come back to it, and we're going to see why it is for you that he's heroic. But anyone else, any people in the world that we can all immediately paint a picture of?
David Attenborough.
David Attenborough. Okay, thank you. Very good.
Mahatma Gandhi.
Mahatma Gandhi, great political figure and activist, social change. Anyone else? A philanthropic person? A spiritual figurehead?
Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa, for the selfless acts of kindness that she performed in her life. Anyone else that comes to mind? Any heroic figures? Everyone's got a mind block, I think. I'm sure there are many. Whoever it may be, you find, whether it's Martin Luther King or Gandhi, or it could even be a sports person, someone who's achieved amazing things, Michael Jordan, or an incredible cricket or a football player or something. What you'll recognize in their life is that all of them went through something called a hero's journey or a heroine's journey. And this also gives us a key to and a lens through which we can see our own life and ask ourselves the question, am I willing to also go on this journey to find the hero or the heroine within myself? The hero's journey, it's interesting, even if you look at Hollywood movies and you look at heroes in, whether it's Star Wars or The Matrix, or you find that this pattern always occurs again and again and again for anyone who wants to go on a journey to do something amazing in their life. And as you mentioned, doing something amazing doesn't just mean something in the world that the whole, universe will find out about. It could just be in your own sphere of influence, but it's nevertheless heroic. But in order to become that hero or heroine, these are the general ingredients that someone has to go through. The hero's journey is a journey from the known into the unknown. To achieve the potentiality of life, we have to be willing to step out of what we know and go into the unknown. Because the unknown is where 99.9% of human potential resides. But most people never get there, because what happens in the hero's journey is that the first thing is there is a call to adventure. Every single person in their life, there could be an event, an experience, a person, an opportunity. Something will arise in your life which is a call to adventure, which is an opportunity for you to now step beyond what you know into the unknown. And that call to adventure is the beginning of the hero's journey. Now, if you reflect on your own life, this might have already happened. This may be happening right now. And if it hasn't, rest assured, it will happen. Something will happen in your life which gives you the opportunity to go on an adventure, to explore beyond what you know. Now, what do you think happens to 99% of people who get the call to adventure?
Ignore it.
They ignore it. Either they're scared, either they're lazy and lethargic, either they're too concerned about public opinion and what others say about them. There could be many, many reasons, but for 99.9% of people, when the call to adventure comes to do something incredible in your life, they turn it down. Whereas when you see all these amazing people who did incredible things, not just, as I said, in the big wide world, but also just in their, sometimes in their small circles, they rose to the challenge. And so the first thing is we have to have that bravery to rise to the challenge, the call of adventure. On the hero's journey, as they take the call to adventure, the next thing that happens is there will be a road of trials. There will be obstacles. There will be sometimes discouragement. There will be sometimes people who convince you can't do it. There will be basically all of these things blocking you on your path. And some people fall there. They don't go much beyond that. But the hero, the one who turns out to be a hero, basically navigates that road of trials and recognizes if a path doesn't have any obstacles, it probably doesn't lead anywhere significant. On the hero's journey, then what happens is this very, very interesting point called the threshold. In our life, if we're going to achieve the potentiality of living, there will be a point when we cross over from the known into the unknown. There will be a time when we cross over into a way of living that is very new to us. And that brings a lot of apprehension, that brings a lot of sense of insecurity. But the person on the hero's journey continues on because they know there's something amazing that I can discover on the other side if I keep going. As the hero goes on their journey, what generally happens is they will get supernatural aid. In other words, people will then enter your life. Mentors, coaches, fans, friends, people who are genuine well-wishers. They will come about in your life and support you on that journey, guide you and coach you through that path. And as you continue on, there will be temptations, challenges, doubts, distractions, things that cause you to wonder, have I made the right decision to go on this journey? Am I doing the right thing? But the hero carries on. And they come to a point where they realize there's no return. It's like sometimes a plane will fly from one destination to another. And on any given plane journey, there's a point of no return. When it's used up so much fuel that now there's no choice. You can't turn back. You have to find your destination now. And so there's a point in our life where we're endeavoring for something and we come to this point of no return and we realize once I go beyond here, there's no turning back. And that again brings a lot of apprehension. But the hero continues on. And then there's a great victory. There's a revelation. There's a great gift. There's an achievement. There's a connection that's made. And that is the fruit of their journey, gained in the unknown world. And then eventually that person comes back into that world with that victory, with that elevated conscious state, and then does something amazing to share that gift with the people and the wider society. This is basically the hero's journey. And if we want to go from existing to living, we have to look at this journey and realize that these are some of the ingredients, these are some of the elements, these are some of the things I'm going to have to go through if I want to achieve the totality of what my life can be. And the spiritual teachers and the spiritual stories from ancient wisdom literatures are continuously encouraging us to go on this journey so that we can make this transition from just existing to actually, on top of existing, really living. Here we are in the Hindu network, and perhaps one of the most famous books in the entirety of the Hindu literature is the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita, if we were to pick a single book to represent all the traditions of ancient India, and a book which encompasses all the major philosophical and spiritual insights of that tradition, then the Bhagavad Gita would be that book. The Bhagavad Gita was spoken 5,000 years ago, as many of you are aware, on a battlefield. Here you can see on the cover of the Bhagavad Gita is a picture of Krishna and Arjuna on a chariot. Arjuna is the hero, but at this point he's not a hero, because he's having doubts, he's having confusions, and Krishna is his supernatural aid who comes in and guides him through that journey. And so the events preceding the Bhagavad Gita and the events after the Bhagavad Gita occurs are very, very telling, because they're basically the hero's journey. In the bigger story in which the Bhagavad Gita occurs, which is known as the Mahabharata, there are basically two families of warriors. On the left-hand side, you have the Kauravas, and on the right-hand side, you have the Pandavas. The good and the evil, you could say. The Pandavas representing the highest ethics, morals, the individuals of the highest spotless character. And on the left-hand side, you have the Kauravas, who are exploitative, envious, unjust, and unkind in their dealings in all respects. And at one point in that journey, there's a gambling match. And here in the picture, you can see the wife of the Pandavas. Her name was Draupadi, and she was disrobed. She was kind of humiliated in public view. And it's said that this scene in the ancient story was Arjuna's call to adventure, because it was at this moment that he realized, I have to do something to change the mentality of these individuals who have done this incredibly atrocious act. And from that situation, there were many, many trials and tribulations that Arjuna came through. And then Arjuna, he came to a threshold. From the known to the unknown. He arrived on the battlefield, and it seemed as though there was no other way to solve this issue with the opposing party except to go to war with them. And in that threshold, he was questioning whether he should go from the known to the unknown. And he was seriously doubting whether to take this step. And then the supernatural aid came in the form of Krishna, who spoke the Bhagavad Gita to him, this immortal wisdom. And Krishna basically guided him through his doubts, through his distractions, through his weaknesses. And eventually Arjuna decided to fight that battle. And there was a point of no return when he realized in the middle of the battle that we have to go all out and we have to try to win. And Arjuna did indeed get that victory and finally came back and ruled the world in great prosperity. Why am I sharing this with you? Because again, we see the hero's journey playing out in Arjuna's life. And the Bhagavad Gita is an incredibly significant book, because the Bhagavad Gita is almost like the manual which gives you the inspiration to go on this journey in your life. The Bhagavad Gita is not just a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, because if you look at every question that Arjuna asks, if you look at every doubt that he presents to Krishna, if you look at every reservation that he comes up with, it's basically the doubts, the weaknesses, the questions, the dilemmas that each one of us will have within our hearts when we go on our journey of life. And therefore the Bhagavad Gita remains a great book of inspiration for anyone who wants to go on this hero's journey and make that transition from just existing to actually living. So what is the actual cost of living? It's not a number. The cost of living is not a number. The cost of living is all of those things that you guys said. Taking a risk, being willing to make a sacrifice, being ready to question and challenge how you've been living, asking the right questions, and taking the help of those who can open your hearts and minds to another way, another path which has greater potentiality. And that is the one spiritual perspective on the hero's journey. Some people think the writing is on the wall for their life. Here it was written on the wall. Art is pointless. You have to go out, get an actual job and make a living. You can't just let the rest of your life be a joke, a failure. You'll end up a starving artist, contribute to society instead of wasting time. You're worthless. These are some of the messages that go through someone's mind when they're locked into the notion that it's just about existing. However, through spirituality, what can happen is we can change our perspective and we can realize that no, there's another side to that statement. Art is pointless without passion. You have to go out and create art. Get an actual job doing what you love and make a living by being yourself. You can't just let other people define the rest of your life and say you will be a joke, a failure. Follow your heart. You will end up happy and free, not a starving artist. Love your art and contribute to society by inspiring people instead of wasting time letting others tell you you're worthless. You can change the world. And that's the potentiality from just existing to, on top of existing, living and actually finding what can be the amazing things that each one of us can achieve in our life. And so this was just some short words that I wanted to share with you on the cost of living. I'm sorry I didn't go into the numbers and I didn't give you any economic solutions or any political ways to solve the problem. But what I wanted to just highlight to you today is the problem we see in the world is not the cost of living. The problem we're seeing on the news is the cost of existing. Yet the cost of living is a cost we should all be thinking about, because each one of us still have time, each one of us still have energy, and each one of us still have the opportunity to achieve the potentiality of what we're meant to be. But that will require us to go on the hero's journey and to embrace some of the discomfort that comes along with that journey. So thank you very much for your attention. I think we have a few minutes. If there are any questions or comments or anything you'd like to ask or reflect upon in terms of anything we've discussed this evening. Would any of you like to ask a question?
What was your hero's journey?
Not much of a hero, trying. But yeah, I can see that I also, if we go back to that slide, I can see that when I was, if we look at this slide, when I was 21, I grew up in northwest London, in Wembley, and I was lucky enough in my life to grow up in a family where I had everything I needed. My brother did really well at university. He became an investment banker and still is an investment banker. And I went to university, UCL, but from a young age I was always questioning what the purpose of life was, whether there was meant to be something more. And so when I graduated, I guess that was my call to adventure, because it was a crossroads for me of whether to go into the corporate world, which there's nothing wrong with, and you can be very spiritual and live in a business environment. But for me personally, at that point, it was a juncture, it was a call to adventure. And there was the opportunity to take some time out and go to India for 6 months. And you can imagine after your parents have dished out on university fees and are expecting you to work in the world and achieve a certain status. We used to have a joke, it was like, become a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure. Those are the three options. So it was a call to adventure, and it was difficult because there were many people who felt as though I was throwing it away. I was throwing away opportunities and I was doing something irresponsible. But somehow I had the courage to follow my heart, and I went to India when I was 21. And I guess there I found my calling. I found a spiritual teaching, a spiritual practice which really touched me on a deep level, and which I thought contained messages and a wisdom that the world really needs to hear. And so when I came back, I had to have that second very awkward conversation with my family to tell them that this wasn't just a 6-month sabbatical, but I think this is turning into a longer term aspiration. And at that time, I decided to join the monastery. We have a monastery in Watford. And those early years of monastic life had many trials. It was difficult. Of course, seeing all of my friends from university, excel in their career and do so many things, naturally it brought doubts to my mind. Like, am I doing the right thing? Like, maybe 3 years later, I'm going to realize this was totally wrong. But I kept on going. And I had supernatural aid. I had many incredible people who came in my life and helped me on that journey. And I guess it's the point of no return now. I'm 41, so over the hill. But there's no actual sense of wanting to go back. I feel like I found my purpose. I found the contribution that I'm meant to make in my life. And so that was the kind of little bit of the journey that I went on. And I think everyone has their own journey. The Bhagavad Gita, it actually begins and ends with the words dharma. You may have heard this Sanskrit word. Dharma actually means purpose or meaning. And it's said that every single person has their own dharma. Every single person has their own purpose, their own meaning, their own contribution that they're meant to make to the world. Einstein, he once famously said, everyone is a genius, but if you convince a fish that it has to climb a tree, it will think its whole life thinking it's a failure. It will live its whole life thinking it's a failure. So I think we all have our own calling, our own dharma, our own journey to go on. And today, I guess, is just an opportunity for you to just really think, let me keep my eyes and ears open. When is that call to adventure coming? And how can I rise to the challenge so that I can actually explore my life in a bigger way? So yeah, I hope that helps a little bit. Yeah. Any final questions anyone has? Otherwise, yeah. Maybe it can be a final question.
What if we are maybe more introverted, more risk averse? When we talk about words like adventure and taking a big step, how does one perhaps navigate that? Is that to be navigated?
Yeah. When I was thinking of making the decision of becoming a monk, someone said something to me which really made me think differently about decision making. And what they said is, when you're about to make a decision, don't just constantly think about what could go wrong, but start getting excited about what could go right. They said, don't allow your decisions to be driven by your fears, but let your decisions be driven by your dreams. And so there's a sense in which the risk-averse mind is not any different to any other mind. I don't think everyone likes security. But what the risk taker does is they frame that emotion when they're going through the risk in a different way. And I'll give you an example. To this day, I get nervous speaking in front of people. Right? I've been doing this like practically every day for 20 years, and still that energy comes when you stand in front of an audience. I think whenever a speaker comes in front of an audience, there's an energy that goes through you. Now, how do you respond to that energy as a speaker? You could be meditating. As I get up here to speak to all of you, I could be meditating on everything that could go wrong and how everyone's going to think I'm a fool and I'm going to, mess it up. And if I meditate on that, then I'll basically end up here fearful, nervous, apprehensive. That will be my emotional state. But that same energy, when I come up, if I'm meditating on what could go right, the beautiful contribution I could make to someone's life, how I could inspire a spark within a soul to do something incredible, then when I stand up here, that same energy will be translated as excitement, wonder, feeling of adventure. So I would say the person who takes risks and the person who's risk averse, they actually have the same emotional state within them, but the risk averse person is meditating on what could go wrong, whereas the risk taker is meditating on what could go right. And therefore it's just about making that shift. So think about that quote. When making decisions, don't allow your decisions to be determined by your fears, but allow your decisions to be determined by your dreams. And then you may make decisions which open up beautiful path of discovery.
I have one more question.
Yes.
You know how we talked about patience in the beginning? How to not confuse patience, like when you need to be patient, and when you need to like push
Act.
and
Yeah.
act.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a difficult one.
No, yeah. Both qualities are important. Patience without vision is dangerous, because that can just ground us into our situation without any sense of movement. And vision without patience and acting without that patience can go on the other extreme. So both qualities are very, very important. And the idea is that even when on the hero's journey, there's always movement forward. Now you may say, but isn't there time when a hero is supposed to also be patient and wait? Yes, externally they may be waiting, but there are other things that they're doing in their life internally to grow towards that journey that they're taking. So patience doesn't mean that you're not growing, doesn't mean that you're not moving towards, doesn't mean that you're not contributing towards your dream. It just may mean at this time you have to accept the situation as it is and internalize your journey forward. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so, like, for example, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement, his name was A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. And when he was very, very young in 1922, his spiritual teacher told him to spread this wisdom all across the world. Now, the interesting thing is he never actually left for doing that task until he was 69, which was in 1965. So basically, that's 43 years later. So he almost had his call to adventure in 1922, but he actually took that step of actually doing the adventure at 1965, 43 years later. But in his biography, that period of life from 22 to 65 is entitled A Lifetime in Preparation. And so even though he had not stepped outside of India to go on that journey of spreading that spiritual knowledge, not physically stepped, internally he was preparing himself, internally he was equipping himself, and he was intensifying his meditation and making sure other things were in place so that when he would make that journey it would be successful. And so I would say even when a hero is patient, they're still internally very active, because there's because that vision has consumed you. And so you can't not be thinking about it and working on it. I hope that helps. Okay, so thank you very much. I think we should stop there. It was a real pleasure to be with you all, and really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope we'll be able to connect again in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.